Why, hello everyone. It's just me again, April. And I'm here in my van, Melody, one of the loves of my life. And I'm just going to do a little bit of storytelling for you guys today to alleviate some of your boredom or soothe you in some kind of way, or just give you a good little story to listen to. I really believe in the kind of, hey Brittany, the kind of ancient sacred art that's within storytelling, and I think at times like this, it's like my time. Like, I love it. Like, I love doing stories when there's, we live in such a busy world where everything is go, go, go all the time, and storytelling is a very unique opportunity to just sit and chill in the moment and do some deep listening, and I think in our day and age we don't get to do that very often. I imagine back into the times when records and things were first released and people would sit and listen to the whole album, and we shuffle through things now so quickly and have a very short attention span. Hey Mandy. But yeah, so I love now that people are kind of being forced to be more present and to sit still and sit with themselves, or, sit with a book, or sit with your loved ones, and just be present, so, aw, love you too. So, I'll put my little fake spectacles on, and, yeah, so I did a little bit of a read yesterday. I'm trying to get this live video thing underneath my belt, but I'm just a little technophobe who lives in the jungles most of the time, so yeah, it's just been a fun journey trying to figure out how it goes. I just deleted a whole bunch of shit off my phone so that I could have a bit more room to hopefully save these videos. The live ones are fun because I like seeing all your little comments, so everyone feel free to type away and comment as you feel the need to. But yeah, until then, I'm going to be here in my van with my little crystal that Mercedes gave me, and my book, A Version of You, which I wrote a couple years ago, and I do storytelling performances with them. I usually have my bassist Twigman with me to add a melodic accompaniment to it, but this time I'm just going to do some raw stories. So, welcome to the space. Last time I did a chapter and a half, and the second chapter got cut off, so I'm just going to start at that beginning chapter again, because, and yeah, just drinking beer, hanging out, I spoke to my sister on the phone today, and she's up in New York, and she was telling me that they're all on lockdown, and yeah, I know, you're just 2 hours away, Twigman. But yeah, my sister's on lockdown, and she's got all the kids and stuff, and it's snowing up there, and but she had a good perspective on it all. She just said, I'm trying to think of it like an unpaid holiday, so it is a bit of an unpaid holiday. So cheers, guys, to be in the moment and doing what we can. This is what I can do: drink beer and tell stories. The last chapter we touched upon, I just left Melbourne, and it was kind of like a dream chapter. I had this incredible dream that really changed things for me. I don't know if you guys have ever had that before, where it could be a dream, it could be a idea, that just shifts everything for you, changes it all, so yeah, Brittany, I'm gonna come to New York. I will, when it gets a bit warmer, okay. I just die in the cold. But yeah, so the last chapter I had just left Melbourne, basically based upon a dream that I had had, and it was about these big giant gods and the creatures, and kind of this definitive I don't know, disassociation or association between masculine and feminine, and love and spirit, and trying to find that the highest calling, which is obviously the spirit calling, but sometimes we get there through love, all the times actually I think we get there through love. So that was me coming out of that love bubble and realizing that I wanted to find some kind of higher love, you know. And yeah, so the next chapter is arriving at some weird destination that I had no idea where I was going. So it's called Mumbari Magic. You might have heard a little bit of this yesterday, but if you didn't, if you did, it doesn't matter. So, Mumbari Magic. It's on the 22nd of November 2014. After the ascension of a lumpy hill had been met with thin success, our nameless bus finally creaked to a halt, and its wheels wheezed out in rested relief. The dark cloak of night wrapped its arms around Christina, Bruce, and I, as we found ourselves at a halt upon a body of land that was known as Mumbari. Stepping through the white accordion doors of the bus, I allowed my eyes to fall upon yet another house on wheels that had been parked directly in front of us. The mobile home had been draped with white linen sheets that blew in the balmy breeze like cirrus clouds. The clouds then parted to reveal two sleepy faces who immediately retracted with the shock of headlights upon their delicate eyes. In an attempt to distinguish where we were, I peered into the final resting place that would be our encampment for the next few days, though all I could determine was that we were somewhere in the middle of nowhere. A rustle of leaves enveloped me in a swaying lullaby, encouraging that I be okay with my displacement, and the late evening gave nothing of my location away, but instead offered me a warm embrace that was born of a midsummer's dream. As four headlight-stained eyes peered out once more from behind a white mask of linen clouds, squinting into the darkness, they took on the slender form of 4 crescent moons. 2 of the eyeballs were aflame with green fires, whilst the other 2 were as brown as the earth that crumbled beneath my bare feet, their diversities filling the night sky with whispers of chalk and of cheese. Both pair of lunar eyes belonged to 2 undressed bodies that began to part the clouds, pouring out from beneath them like diaphanous raindrops. One body wore brown skin whilst the other wore cream. One belonged to a woman and the other a man. I lose my place so easily. It's very hot and I can't see. Both pair of lunar eyes belonged to 2 undressed bodies that began to part the clouds, pouring out from beneath them like diaphanous raindrops. One body wore brown skin whilst the other wore cream. One belonged to a woman and the other a man. Their 2 tones met instinctively just below waist level, as they tenderly held one another's hands and walked towards us. Like an oyster shell with 2 separate coverings, their hands clasped over the couple's differences, transforming them both into a single pearl. If you want to read along, I don't know, I know a lot of you got your own books and stuff, but we're on page 323, so just putting that out there. Our small group stood together in the dark of the night, huddled over a homemade kitchen that looked to have been constructed some time ago. Oyster shell hands began pressing halloumi upon aged bread, presenting Bruce, Christina, and I with an offering of food that was served to welcome us all to the rainbow gathering. As I scraped a lump of mold away from my piece of bread, the late hours slipped between my appreciative fingertips. That evening, Bruce, Christina, and we lay our squashed bodies to sleep in the back of Bruce's bus, like 3 little piggies in a zebra print row. After gazing around at the colourful character of transportation that had swallowed me up whole, and despite Bruce's sleepy reservations, I decidedly crowned his bus with the name Broomhilda. Broomhilda's purple velvet tongue shimmered against the candlelight, thankful to finally have an identity. And I stared at her ceiling as if it held the key to my dreams. Yet sleep still managed to escape my capture, riding off upon an animal that was half zebra and half sheep. I could not know when the beast of sleep would return to me, therefore I cast my eyes out of the side window and pondered over where my pathway had led me. Millions of stars dotted the warm Australian sky, shining like the inverted image of ginger freckles upon an endless and pale face. Some gathered in clusters, whilst others sat apart in definitive isolation, just like us. But every single one of those stars, they twinkled with a fresh wish that had been cast upon its soft edges. The stars furiously flickered as if they were pressing light so deep inside of themselves that, well, every single wish that had ever been made upon them would simply be compelled to come true. Whilst the world slept and dreamt, the stars worked the graveyard shift with little thanks from their employers, but continued their selfless labor nonetheless. Some stars winked at me as if together we shared a private joke, but as I lay beneath zebra sheets, I felt as though I had somehow missed the punchline. The reality of me following a dream that had been purely based upon a ceiling sent a cool chill across my body, leaving me with a conscience that said that I shouldn't trust it. My eyes blinked in replication of the light that twinkled above me, but hesitantly I wondered if I could even trust in the dutiful work of the stars. Laying there in Broomhilda with all of my comfort stripped away from me except that which lived inside of my little red rucksack, I could not help but to feel bare. Pangs of fear hitched a ride upon my heartbeat, but I tried to breathe and be brave amongst their traversing company. Christina and Bruce slept peacefully beside me in Broomhilda's psychedelic belly with faces that looked like spent children. And as I closed my eyes in pursuit of my own dreams, I began to slowly follow them to the other side. Drink breaks are very important. The next morning, I awoke to the sound of innumerous birds. Hey, Mercedes! The next morning, I awoke to the sound of innumerous birds singing wildly into the heat of a new day. Removing the zebra blanket from the clamminess of my body, I followed the bird song outside, as if their urgent chirps were but directions to an underground rave. They seemed to suggest that there was not a moment to lose, so I dismounted Broomhilda with legs that were not yet quite acquainted with the vertical demands of the day, and I allowed the soft focus of my morning eyes to explore the magnificence of Mumbari. Should I have been at the very top of a 10-story building, my jaw would have crashed through each concrete level and dropped all the way down to the ground floor. Thankfully, though, there were neither traces of buildings nor tarmac around me, only splendidly green hills that rolled out in an endless wave as far as the eye could see. Our campsite sat perfectly perched atop of a lone hill, and as I walked out towards the edge of that hill, my vision fell like a waterfall down into the river below me. The sun flirtatiously glimmered across its brown, watery skin, showering the river with an excess of warm kisses so that we could embark upon an early morning swim if we so pleased. The river wound in a brown murkiness that was similar to the dream river that had somehow led me there, to Mumbari. And realizing their connection, I gasped at my own private confirmation of placement. My feet stood exactly at the point where the river split from right to left, showing me that I had simply been led exactly where I needed to be. Like a wild bird, my eyes caught a ride upon the soft winds of change and soared up towards the heavens, coming to a stop upon a tribe of treetops that stood alongside of the river. The wild crowns of the trees bunched together like an army of broccoli, silhouetting a bright blue sky that had not a single cloud in sight. I began to feel a great clarity coming over me. The hills beneath and around the trees rolled into one another like the lumps of lovers who had voluntarily became entwined for all of eternity, slumping into one another's self-imposed boundaries. The scene merged and crawled before me, stretching and sprawling itself over my eyes with an undisturbed beauty. So, this is Australia, I sighed. 400 acres of ancient indigenous land had been breathtakingly etched into the magic of Mumbari's landscape. Yet despite its beauty, there was something slightly offbeat within the rustle of the trees. Hot air pushed up through the thick broccoli leaves, blowing a feeling of unrest all around my body, though it was a feeling that I could not quite understand. Returning to camp, I watched as Christina floated out from the mouth of Broomhilda and lightly fell into a position of prayer upon the viridescent grass. Christina's nimble knees tentatively met the earth like a first kiss, whilst the palms of her hands opened themselves up and pressed into the ground upon which we stood. Although I did not quite follow intellectually, my body impulsively followed Christina's example and mimicked her movements. Christina straightened the length of her backbone and showed me with the intimate language of her body, of the unequivocal importance in paying respect to the land. Mumbari was an entity that awaited my introduction. Therefore, I too kissed the ground with my kneecaps for the very first time, pushing my own essence out from the palms of my hands as if to introduce myself. I wordlessly thanked Mumbari for having me as a guest. The curl of Christina's fingers arose from the earth and rested themselves on the outline of her heart. I also rested the fingertips of my right hand over my heart and cradled its faint pulse. With one hand touching the brown of the earth and the other resting upon the brown-skinned beat of my heart, I began to feel the movement of a full circuit flowing within me. Together, Christina and I, we walked a rite of passage, and I effortlessly fell into it, as if it were a familiar bedtime story that I had not heard since childhood. It felt like a story that I had always known, only I had somehow forgotten once I had become grown, but Christina was my reminder, and imitation was her flattery. And together we gave thanks to Mumbari, and I realized in that moment that, well, I could very well trust in the work of the stars. For the land and the cosmos were in this together, a full circuit. The distant echo of Food Circle reverberated from the bed of the river below us. Food Circle! And beneath the blaze of Brisbane's sun, Christina and I arose, and we began our descent into the rainbow gathering. That was my first international rainbow gathering. I used to go to some in Ocala, my friend freshman. As a teenager, oh no, it keeps booting you off. Is anyone else having trouble being booted off? Can everyone hear me okay? Anyone want to give me some feedback? I don't know why it keeps booting you off. Don't know. Can you guys hear it okay? I'll just keep reading until then, but if you're having any difficulties, let me know. I don't know. I will try to disconnect from the Wi-Fi at the house and just see if that works a little bit better. Okay. Moving forward. As a teenager, I had found great escape in the gathering of the rainbow souls. At 19 years old, Stephanie, freshman, and I had discovered a world of rainbow children that gathered by the hundreds in Ocala's National Forest. The rainbow children that I had met there wore no clothes upon their bodies and attempted to also undress their egos. It was there that peacock-coloured stars had pushed themselves into the fabric of my being, transforming me from a broken Gothic girl into the beginnings of a flower child. The rainbow children had blossomed in the protection of Ocala's wilderness, and as I joined them in their organic transformations, their prismatic petals had lined my pathway to self-discovery. The years had long passed since those days of naked woodland creatures who sought out vulnerability in order to find themselves. Yet as I walked the path down to Food Circle, I began to see an alternate version of them appear before me once again. I did tell you about this, Mercedes. And also, for the record, I have your crystal. Alright, I'm glad you guys can all hear me okay. A variety of undressed skins walked casually through the forest of Mumbari without having any material bounds attached to them. White light poured down from the sky and fell upon an assortment of pale skins, giving the appearance that their bodies were one with the sun. Brown limbs crouched down beside the mouth of the river, replicating its thick shades of enriching mud. Thin freckles stood out amongst chubby moles in a break for independence, and as an alliance of released inhibitions dressed everyone in absolute starkness. Wrinkles lounged shamelessly against a sea of additionally uncurbed aged lines, whilst misshapen breasts and heavy-set testicles hung from their owners like animals without need for any fabricated chains. Everyone looked so free, but as I stood beside the mouth of the river fully clothed, I could not help but to associate nudity with its wayward twin. Sexuality. Immersing myself within that sea of comfortable bodies, I began to feel the stirrings of my own body asking for acknowledgement beneath its tattered robes. I was undoubtedly overdressed and, well, because of it, pangs of exposure began to rouge my cheeks, but brown skin made hard work of a visualized embarrassment. Hand in hand with their adult children ran across river rocks with fearless legs that were as naked as the day that they were born. And their innocent abandon caused me to question my own hesitation. So I began to disrobe. As I allowed my resentful clothes to fall from me, I thought over the common association of nudity and her twin, sexuality. Though they are known to be identical, nudity and sexuality are very dissimilar from one another. Sexuality is the extroverted twin. Full of fearlessness and abandon, she leads the way forward with nothing to hide. Nudity is more introverted. She can often be found following sexuality to the ends of the earth with a loyalty that will never be extinguished. Nudity has her own quiet passions, yet they must first always be inspired and permitted to exist by her sister, sexuality. And in the lands of association, it is said that one twin is often mistaken for the other. The colourful people that peppered my vision at the Rainbow Gathering were more than just products of carnal nature. I watched as a young girl held the hand of a naked man, and together they were as pure as the morning sun. Once I had become disentangled from sexual connotations, standing as bare as the day that I was born, I began to feel that sun upon my entire body. My unmasked limbs silently spoke out to me, saying, "Hey, this is just who I am." It did not take long before I realized clothes to be the true imposter of the land. The food circle hovered around the mouth of the river like a promised kiss. And as I joined hands with its occupants, I anticipated the fruition of such an affectionate oath. Together we each began chanting out with sounds of joy and appreciation, filling the air around us with gratitude of our replenishment. It was a glorious thing to hold hands in the morning, chant out in nudity, and sing for my breakfast. And whilst eating my porridge out of a silver dog bowl, I listened to children and adults laugh as one, and I felt like the most contented stray dog in all of the world. After breakfast, the talking feather circle began, and as a bristled bird feather was passed around from hand to hand, I recalled my own personal introduction to a circle where feathers had unknowingly taught me how to talk. In my days of adolescent anger and confusion, I had unwillingly spent much of my time in and out of juvenile detention centres. Years of shackles and chains had kept me in an inescapable hell, until a Native American-based detention centre called Vision Quest had focused its iris upon me. Vision Quest would come to be the final resting place for my misplaced youthful imprisonment. Amongst horse therapy, boot camp training, and sweat lodges, Vision Quest had also introduced me to talking feather circles. I had been a 17-year-old girl who had a mouse stuck inside of her voice box. Yet with a feather in hand, I began discovering the whispers that came from within that mouse. One cannot fly without wings. Wings cannot fly without feathers, and there are many kinds of feathers in the world from which to choose from. The talking feather specifically, It serves as a microphone. No one is allowed to interrupt you, cut you off, or judge you. Those without the feather are only required to listen, and for that, Vision Quest saw that I shifted in my inability to share. Hey, John. Shout out to John. Love ya. 10 years had passed since that chapter in my life, yet there I was in Mumbari, encircled with love, as a talking feather floated between a hurricane of caring hands when my turn came around, despite the incessant dialogue that always goes on in my head. I only had but one thing to say. Thanks. The original caretakers of the land that we know as Australia are an indigenous group of people known as the Aborigines. The Aborigines are of dark skin and tribal nature, for they lived off of the lands for thousands of years before colonization took over. They not only lived off the land, but the Aborigines also lived in communion with the land, nurturing it, protecting it, entwining their life with it, as if they were the mothers to their environment, hence the title, Caretaker. Yet, like so many native cultures, the Aborigines have been forced beneath the sharp blade of European development, and their ways of life have been mercilessly mutilated into unrecognizability. I lost my place. It was amongst Talking Feather Circle where the unrest of Mumbari was gradually brought to light. Bad signal? That's what happens when you live in fucking Portugal, John. Thanks for joining, though. Oh, my mum just joined. Hey, mummy. The caretaker of Mumbari had opened up her property and welcomed the rainbows so that we may each enjoy her land before it was to be taken away from her. Governmental hands feverishly rubbed themselves together over our heads with dollar sign tattoos etched upon their knuckles. Apparently, with just a few $1 million, generations of good intentions can be completely eradicated, replaced by Chinese factories that only leave a haunted memory of what once was. And as a gentle tree dweller sat down beside me with a feather in his hand, he mourned over the imminent loss of the land. Some hippies tried to gather themselves enough to do something about such atrocities, whilst others just shrugged their shoulders in helplessness. All the while, the pipe for peace was passed. Auntie Bev was caretaker to the magical land of Mumbari. Bev, like many native elders before her, was given the endearment Auntie as a sign of respect. It was also a way to connect and remind those that spoke her name of how we are all but one family here upon this earth. And that afternoon I sat in the refuge of Auntie Bev's home amongst a selected few and watched a scene of family unfold before me. It was only because of those whose circle I travelled within that I found myself in such close-knitted company. Therefore, I watched quietly, just as a spectator should. The kindness in Auntie Bev's eyes sat in 2 brown pools of earthy ambience. Firelight flickered from amongst their concern and travelled down into the caverns of her heart. Auntie was a part of an indigenous tribe that had nurtured the bounty of Mumbari for 3 generations, working within its delicacies and flowing alongside of its fearsome streams. And as Auntie Bev perched on a chair that shadowed her dining room table, the man sought to take all of that away from her. It's funny, I think it's a very familiar feeling that we can all relate to right now, you know. We live in a society that's built all up around us and it's crumbling right now, you know. What are you left with? Just your gifts and your talents and your heart. So. A PhD sat proudly upon Auntie Bev's wall, watching over us all, and Auntie Bev explained to us of how she was a self-educated woman with a knowledge for flora and fauna that was so expansive that she had been awarded an honorary PhD. D. I love you. Bev had gracefully stepped away from the stereotypical categorization of savage simplicity and showed that through her complete communion with the land, of how she knew more about her surroundings than any government could ever pretend. Auntie Bev had lightning bolts for fingertips, and she sat like a forgotten queen upon her wooden throne. The rainbow children and I gathered around her feet like naked children, resting upon the cool of her kitchen tiles. Before long, Auntie Bev began to speak of Dreamtime, relaying to us the stories of her people and her culture. Smoky visions woke upon her lips, breathing life into the forgotten art of storytelling. Through Auntie's words, I was completely captivated. Tribal magic swirled around me with the winds of fascination. Truth resonated through her teeth and went out to join the birds in their song, whilst all those who were guests within Bev's house understood of our privilege within her presence. So casting my eyes around the room, I peered into each pair of eyes that stared so hungrily upon our storyteller, drinking in her words appreciatively. Hey, Isha. Deep down, we all knew that city lives... Deep down, we all knew that the city lives that we each lived to somehow be incongruent with how our souls truly needed to be housed. So looking at us collectively, I could see that we each harbored a desperate will for Auntie Bev to sow the seeds of our own displaced souls in order to help them grow. Upon that cool tile floor, it was as if a spell had come over us all. We were lost children who needed our good intentions to be identified and recognized by a true woman of the tribe. Whether we knew it or not, each one of us was embarking upon some kind of pilgrimage for indigenous acceptance, or at least what it represented. The rainbow children and I, we were like a book of empty pages that desperately needed colouring in. And whilst Auntie Bev sat tall upon a chair of forgotten queenship, she continued to weave her magical stories of Mumbari across our open hearts. And the strength of Bev's nourishing words fell from her brown lips like an ancient ink, pressing truth upon a stack of dry paper souls that had never been so thirsty. Alright guys, that's all I got for that chapter today, I think. Just gonna kind of chill and do one chapter a day, but Yeah, these were some really transformative and important chapters that come up, you know, because it was it happens, I think, when you leave everything behind that you know and you condense your life into a small little rucksack and you realize that material possessions aren't everything that you thought that they were, you know, and how important it is to be simple and, you know, and light. And I really experienced that when I went out there, and just also all that magic that's just out there in all kinds of nooks and crannies in the world, you know. And we're never going to experience it until we get out of our, you know, regular little vision and go and experience some magic that's out there. You know, it was an incredibly magic experience meeting Auntie Bev and seeing this Aboriginal woman who was such a powerhouse, you know, and just working with the land, which is everything, you know. And as we touched on before, when our society starts to crumble, like in the way that it is right now, you know, and everything that we work towards is stripped from us and taken away, what do you have left? You know, you've got the only things that you have left are your heart and your soul and your talents and your skills. You know, the world crumbles. You can't pay people to build fires for you. You can't pay people to, you know, address what flower and fauna, you know, are edible, or, you know, some real life skills, I think, that in nature that a lot of us are lacking and trying to tap into in this indigenous natural way, you know, because it's what we all came from. And yeah, I guess just during these times, I just want to encourage everyone to just get into that, you know, get over all the bullshit that we've been living our lives by, and just, you know, tap back into some form of simplicity, you know, planting some fruits and veggies and drinking water and being still and reading books and telling stories, and very, very, very important things. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in and listening, and self is all we need to depend on. Yeah, it's true. And not even just ourselves. There's we depend on other people as well, and I think that's one of the biggest things that is happening right now that's troublesome for people, is that there's a big feeling of alienation and aloneness, you know. We're all kind of boxed off in our own little worlds, and that can be very confronting in some times. But we're all here together, you know, and for as long as the internet is still working, I'm going to share some stories with you, and if I see you in person, I'll share stories with you. But until then, I hope everyone's staying safe again and keeping a safe distance, and just tuning in, tapping into themselves, because that is what our life is all about, you know, the journey of the self, the journey collectively, and it's got nothing to do with money. You know, so I know a lot of people are upset about money and bills and rent and all this and that, but in the words of my sister, let's just consider it an unpaid vacation. I love you guys. Mwah. Oh yeah, it's my book, A Version of You. You should buy it. It's available on Amazon. It's an audiobook also. Yeah, maybe I'll do a deal or something later on in the week. But alright guys, all the love. I'm gonna finish my beer, cuddle my cat, daydream.